In 2000, Act 228 made medical cannabis legal in Hawaii. Today, medical cannabis patients and their caregivers are still prosecuted by the state of Hawaii.
The chemists press the pills while the hippies in the hills plant the next generation, grow the next strain.
We are the hiccup in the system. We're not going to stand silent. We're going to fix this, and we're going to do whatever it takes to make these guys stop picking on medical cannabis users.
We've got those hippies in the hills and them doctors scripting pills down in the valley below. Grab your horse and you're a vaporizer. Come on, let's go.
Aloha everybody, my name is Mike Ruggles. Let's see, I became an activist back in 2007 when I met Gray Wolf and Roger Christie. It was actually Roger Christie that made me an activist. When I got busted, he had his Ganja Economics, I think. He had this big banner on Bayfront. And so someone suggested I go talk to him because, man, when you get busted over here, with marijuana, it's a pretty lonely place to be because the sentences are rather severe. And at the time, I had medical marijuana and I was following every rule, because what happened was a buddy of mine, you get a phone call and you can hear somebody in the background talking, but they're not really talking to you. And so I call it a butt call. And so, but I could hear him saying, so if a friend brought $300 down to the police department, I could get bailed out of jail? Needs $300. And I could hear a cop go, that's right, sir. And I get down there and I ran into a couple of his other friends. And they'd gotten the same call because he didn't know if anybody was getting these calls. So when I get down there, one of the friends said, well, he asked you, Mike, if you'd go by his house and clean it up. So now I go to his house to clean it up. And even though they haven't got a warrant yet, there was already a white van with all the windows tinted out in there. And so I obviously knew they were cops because over here in Hawaii, you don't get to tint your windows out, but the cops still do it. Anyone else would get pulled over and tinted. So anyway, so when I seen that, I just turned around and I was driving out. And the van got behind me. And so I immediately pulled over because I knew it was the cops. And so I happened to be smoking a doobie, and so when I rolled down the window, all this smoke bellowed out, and they started laughing. And so they were like, whoa, because then he pulled out his badge. He was undercover, pulled out his badge. He says, well, we're police. And so then I started laughing, because I knew they were cops. And so we both had a good little laugh, because he was like, well, why'd you pull over? I said, well, obviously you wanted to talk to me. And he's like, well, what are you doing here? I said, well, a friend wanted me to come by and secure his property because he'd just been arrested. But I could see that it was already secure, so I thought it was time to leave. He's like, okay, fine. So I go home, but I'm a little concerned. And sure enough, a week later, the cops came and busted me. But I kind of knew they were coming, because I forgot that part. I come from a long line of cops. My grandma was a cop, my mom and dad were cops. My dad ended up an FBI agent. And so I'm obviously the black sheep of the family. Anyway, and so I knew they were coming. So now here they come. And even though I had 3 licenses, because I had one for me, one for my wife, and one for my daughter. And at the time, you were allowed 7 plants. And I only had like 16 plants. So I was allowed 21. But the cop, John Weber, I'm going to mention his name because this cop, he'll come into play later, and that's actually how this group all formed. Everybody here, because at one point there was over 40 of us. But anyway, he came and arrested me, even though I knew they were coming, and I cleaned everything up. At one point, because I was watching this thing where, because this was before this bubble hash was just starting to become known. And so I was saving all my shake out on this hammock on the deck. I want to say I had like 50 pounds of shake. Thank God I got rid of that. But I knew they were coming, so I got rid of the shake, got everything cleaned up, and here they come anyway and bust me. And they lie, but after my case, thank God, they began keeping track of cops who would call in and do the medical check. Because what they said was they called in and that the computer said I only had 1 license, even though I had 3, and they saw over 7 plants, and they came and they busted me. So then even though, like I said, because I knew they were coming, I totally cleaned up. And so they found 2 bags of pot, and I was allowed, let's see, 3 ounces. I was allowed 9 ounces. And so I had exactly 9 ounces. And so what they did was they took some pot out of the bags and threw it on the table, outdoor on my patio. And then they took a picture and then collected that and put it in a separate bag and said there were 3 bags. And so anyway, technically they made me 1.5 grams over a pound. Once I was 1.5 grams over a pound, it was a felony, and now they can charge you with a felony for the paraphernalia. Which is a side story, but you know, just recently, and I want to thank Tulsi Gabbard for this, that we were the only state in America where drug paraphernalia was a felony. So over here, even though they catch you with under 1 ounce, it's a petty misdemeanor. The felony would be the bag the pot was in, the papers, your lighter, the pipe. And so there was no such thing as a misdemeanor bust in Hawaii because it always came accompanied with a felony paraphernalia. In fact, later when my collective got busted, at one point I was facing 33 charges and 17 of them were felony paraphernalia. Anyway, so Tulsi Gabbard researched that and she found out that half the people in jail in Hawaii were in there for paraphernalia. And so she got that fixed, and even though I'm still facing those charges, it's no longer a crime in Hawaii. So, thank God for Tulsi. And she fixed that. So anyway, I noticed this John Weber, and he'd gotten an award for Officer of the Year in the year 2000 from Bush. So it was a national award he got. He'd busted over 1,000 potheads on the Big Island that year, and he had 100% kill. And they said the reason he got the award because his 100% kill rate was according to his attention to detail. And if you read between the lines, obviously that means he's a horrible liar, and he was a horrible, pathological liar. And like I say, I came from cops, and so he had me coming down the stairs, and I'd already learned, and I want to say this because my dad told me, hey, there's 3 things you want to remember if you ever get arrested. He said you want to remember to shut up, be quiet, and then don't say anything. So these are the 3 things. If you forget the 2, try to remember at least 1 of those. And so I was remembering all those, and so I was coming down the stairs, and so on the police report, he has me coming down the stairs, and I utter these famous words of John Weber, which is, I don't care about my rights right now. He was saying that he was trying to read me my rights, and I bellowed out, I don't care about my rights right now. And it's like, you're being busted by the cops for something you haven't done, and you don't care about your rights right now? And then he said, and my wife and daughter have nothing to do with all these criminal activities. Like I was pointing to counterfeiting, you know, and meth making, you know, whatever other criminal activities. And so I noticed that this lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly that he had obviously told it a time or 2. And so I put an ad in the paper, and it said, got legal marijuana but been busted anyway, united we stand. This is the funny part of the story, so I'm going to talk about it. So I'm trying to get this ad in the paper, and the lady said, I'm sorry, we can't do that. We can't publish that. I said, why not? Because she said, there's no such thing as legal marijuana. I said, yeah, it is, it's medical. She said, well, it's medical. I said, yeah, well, medical means it's legal. And we got in a little argument, and she just hung up on me. So I'm stubborn, I had her on speed dial, so I called her back, and she hung up. I called her back, and she hung up. Finally, this male voice comes in. Hello, is this Mr. Ruggles? I'm like, yes. It's like, we will run that story. Oh, I forgot this part, because at one point she says it's not true. And so at the time in the personals, the only other ad was some guy that said, spaceship leaving for Venus on day the 21st, bring your own weapons. And so I'm like, so you can say you got a spaceship leaving for Venus, bring your own weapons, but I can't say got legal marijuana but been busted? Anyway, So I get the voice of God, and he's like, we'll run that ad. So I run the ad. And that's how I met all these people. Because every one of these guys, and I want to say there was over 50 of us at one point, had all been busted by who? John Weber, Officer of the Year. And he'd horribly lied. And so I want to bring that up because I started this fight, like I say, in 2007 when we ran the ad. We've come a long ways, and we've done countless lawsuits. We sued them over not following the LLP. And it's taken me this long just to figure out who the real culprit is. Who's been, persecuting medical cannabis users since the year 2000. Well, obviously it's the prosecutors and the cops but it goes deeper than that. There's a reason why, even though we passed the LLP in 2008, that they won't follow it. And the reason is this, it's called federal matching funds. And what happens is federal matching funds, and they only do this for cannabis, they match whenever, whenever cops do a marijuana bust, they always bring 15 of them. Because they can charge the Fed for every cop and every hour that cop spends on that. And so they have a task force over here, and they do these things called compliance checks on medical guys. And they'll have a ground crew of 50 people with one helicopter in the air. And they go around and they do these unwarranted things called compliance checks. In fact, when I got busted back in, when was that, 15? And Grey Wolf came down to support me. The next day they came and did a compliance check with Grey Wolf. Anyway, illegal, wrong stuff. And they also have this other thing called administrative forfeiture. Now, administrative forfeiture is a power the governor gave the Attorney General, and if it's under $100,000, in their opinion, it's okay to take it without ever going in front of a judge. All the prosecutor or a cop's got to do is say, hey, we caught him smoking pot in his car, he's got a Rolls Royce, they take your Rolls Royce. And that's called administrative forfeiture. And that too is illegal because obviously you're innocent until proven guilty. And they bring it up and they say, oh no, you got to do it because otherwise we can't stop the crime. Well, that's silly because obviously later if you're found guilty, a judge can take your stuff. He can throw you in jail and take your stuff and fine you money. And so they don't really have to do that. But that's the main reason they do that today. If we could just stop administrative forfeiture, like what they did to Grey Wolf, and the matching funds, the cops would go back to being regular cops because they don't want to do this. And in fact, just on March 5th, they have a thing called reciprocity. And reciprocity in other states, because they have it, like if you go to Nevada and you got a medical cannabis card, you can go to the dispensary and give them your card and they'll honor it. They'll go, oh, you got a Hawai'i medical card? No problem, come on in. Have some cannabis. Hawaii just passed reciprocity, but look what they do. They go, oh, you got a medical card from Nevada? Well, you got to get one from us. It's $50. We'll believe your doctor, but you got to give us $50. Then come on in and use our dispensary. And so they had a talk thing, and obviously they didn't want anybody to answer it. But on the 6th, so that was just a couple days ago. And so Brittany happened to be seeing her email, and it said, hey, join in on this talk. And so there, yeah, finally people from out of town can get cannabis at the dispensaries. And so she had one question, yeah, because it was the chief of police, some other guy, ATF guy. One guy on the cannabis side was he was a member of the Dispensary Association. And so they're like, hey, great, now tourists, once they pay the $50 fee, which is not reciprocity, can now go to the thing. She says, where can they smoke? Because I was reading the laws and it says you can't smoke in the hotel, there's a 200-foot apron. You can't smoke at the parks, you can't smoke in your rent-a-car, and you can't smoke in any place open to the public. So I'm wondering, now that tourists are allowed to get cannabis at the dispensaries, where can they consume it? And they go, oh, well, good question. You gotta remember, this was 3 days ago. They go, oh, well, good question. And they went off on some edible tangent. Even though you can't get edibles at dispensaries over here. They went, well, man, if you had edibles, they could eat them. And wouldn't that be great? Well, that wasn't the question. So finally, the guy that was in the Dispensary Association, he says, well, you know, the hotels are supposed to supply smoking areas for tobacco smokers, so I suggest you go there. And to me, don't do that. I'm glad we're on camera. Don't do that. You'll get busted immediately. If you look at the law, it says right in the law, if you smoking in your hotel, you're going to get busted and you can't even bring up the fact that you got medical. That's another weird twist. I don't know if they do that in other states, but in Hawaii, if you got a medical card, and even though they stand silent on how you do it, if you get busted, you don't get to bring up the fact you had a medical card. I know that sounds insane, but that really is how they do it.
I've got those hippies in the hills and them doctors scripting pills down in the valley below. Grab your horse and your flask and your vaporizer. Come on, let's go. Hippies in the hills.
All right.
All right, are we ready for the song?